And welcome back, fourth and long fans. It's your footy correspondent, Coach Donnies here, back with another episode of Donnie's Disposals. And as I've come through, I have another awesome chat with another wonderful journo who has a great story that I can't wait to hear. Miss Kirby Fenwick. Kirby, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
All right. As per usual, I always like starting my podcast off just finding a little bit about the person that I'm chatting with outside of the game of footy. I mean, we all love footy. We all love talking footy, but we'll save that for later. We've got plenty of time for that. Let's find out just a little bit about who you are outside of the game of football.
That's such a tough question to answer, isn't it? Who are you? Tell us about yourself. Um, well, I'm a writer and audio producer. I live in Melbourne now, but I grew up in regional Victoria. Grew up going to the local footy club. Oh, we're not talking about footy.
Don't worry, you'd be surprised how many times they drop footy and it's not a problem.
um, yeah, I don't know what much else there is to say. I'm doing my honors at the moment, which is about women in sports journalism in Australia. I'm a very proud auntie. I've got six nieces and nephews who I adore very, very much. Yeah. And I'm a co-founder of Siren, a women in sport collective, of course. Can't
All
forget
right.
that.
We will definitely bring that up because I had the awesome ability to talk to Dr. Casey Simon. So I want to talk with you a little bit more, but that'll be a little bit later. So we're gonna hop in the time machine a little bit. And I always like finding this out because as we were discussing off, Mike, you were interested in how an American got into footy, but I'm always interested in with how footy is kind of ingrained in your life so much, especially being a Victorian. What's your earliest footballing memory?
I was actually thinking about this, and I it's so strange because my earliest football memory is not like there's not actually any football in that memory.
Mhm.
I've just have this memory of being I'm maybe like five or six, and I'm at Whitten Oval, which is the Western Bulldogs' home ground in the western suburbs in Melbourne. And I remember my cousins being there, and a couple of my cousins. I have a lot of cousins, and my mum, like my mum and dad, and my siblings were there. I think it was like one of those Legends games. You know, they used to. I think they still do occasionally have those Legends games, but yeah, it was played at Whitten Oval, and I just have this vague memory of like being there in the standing on the concrete steps in front of the grandstand, which is no longer there now. It's just been torn down, which is quite distressing.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like that's my earliest football memories being at Whitten Oval for a Legends game. Yeah, it's like 30 years ago.
That's a crazy one. And everybody's story is different. Everybody has a different one, whether it's playing with their brother in the background or going to a game or seeing their parents kick the footy around. So I love the different stories. There's never one specific way, which I absolutely love. So I gotta ask this. This is one of my favorite ones. What is your favorite part about the game of football?
Mm. For me, I kind of call myself a bit of a footy romantic in the sense that it's the stories for me.
Mhm.
My wonderful friend Gemma Bastiani, who some of the listeners might be familiar with, is a bit of a stats expert. I call her the AFLW Oracle, and she
Mhm.
loves the numbers and the stats and things like that. And I can appreciate that absolutely, but for me, it's the stories, it's the people. And it's not even necessarily the people that are on the ground. I love talking to fans. I'm always fascinated to hear people in the stands and what their kind of story is and why they're at the footy. Yeah, the stories for me is probably my favorite part, and it doesn't matter where that story happens, whether it happens, on the MCG or whether it happens in the canteen at a country footy club, up in the bush somewhere. Yeah, that's my favorite thing about footy is just all the stories and the people that's been around it.
And that's one of the things that I love about it too is I hear all the time about the stories of the small country towns where they all come together
Mm.
for the local footy game, and just how it always kind of brings them together. Everything's kind of surrounded the footy club, and I always found that fascinating because over here you have your collegiate sports, but once collegiate sports are done, you really don't have much after that. I mean, you've got rec league
Mm.
stuff, which is, I mean, it's pure amateur. I mean, most of the time, what some people would call over here in the States beer leagues. I mean, it's guys drinking beer, just playing to have fun, but there's not a ton of competitiveness. So I got to give the Aussies a lot of credit on that one. Is there's so many pathways even after pros, the guys can still play footy, and it brings the communities together, which I think is absolutely
I
fantastic.
would argue that the reserves are only there to drink beer and have fun. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of competitiveness in the reserves footy leagues, but
It's still a little bit more competitive than the beer leagues over here. Trust me. I've seen some of the rec league basketball. I mean, it is not high quality stuff. So if
yeah, it
I'm
is very interesting
100%
that
honest.
you can get very high quality football being played in, you know, suburban and regional football competitions, men and women, which is it's pretty amazing. Yeah,
Mhm,
that you don't have to go to the AFLW or the AFLM to see a really great game of footy. Like you can
mhm.
find them all over the place on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Well, and sometimes you can even find former AFL or AFLW players playing in country footy league. I mean,
Absolutely,
how many
yeah.
pros? One of the first things they say once they retire is, "Yeah, I'm just going to go back to my local team and play." I'm like, really? Didn't you just retire because you didn't want to play? So it's always fascinating to see, like, they're playing in the SAF, something random AFL in Eastern Victoria, in like 3,000 population town. So it's fascinating for me to see that. Like, you get Daisy Thomas's and some of these pros that maybe haven't strapped up the boots, and they're throwing on for a local thirds game randomly in a 1500.
Yeah,
So it's kind of fascinating.
those games are really interesting because they're actually often a really important fundraisers for those
Hmm.
community footy clubs because it's very expensive to run a footy club, even if you're only running one in a country footy town, you know, in a country town somewhere in regional Victoria. So often those players come out and play one game of footy, and the gate takings and the canteen and the bar takings could, you know,
Hmm.
be hugely significant for that club and could mean, you know, that their year is paid for. So it's a real community service, I think, by
Yeah.
those footballers. It might be a little bit of a you know, a bit of fun for them to kind of get
Hmm.
back out there and kick a few goals, but it can have a really positive impact on those local footy clubs.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I know, that I saw the Carlton draft thing where they had Moons, Daisy Thomas, and on those,
Mm.
and I thought and those were cool because they showed like videos, like the whole town was there, and they were asking fans, "What do you think?" And they're like it's so cool to see a former AFL player here. So it was always fascinating, and I love that it brings the whole town together. So we'll rein it back in a little bit here. Unfortunately, it's easy to say women did not have the pathways to play footy for the years. So I gotta ask, did you ever play footy? And if so, what position did you play?
Well, um, always did, you know, like kick to kick at
Hmm.
like the quarter time breaks and halftime breaks. I grew up going to the local footy club in the country town that I grew up in. My brothers played, my dad played for a little bit when I was much younger. So I would always do that with my mates. You know, the siren goes and you run out onto the oval and kick to kick a little bit. I do remember playing. I don't know what the context of this was. I just can't remember. But I would have been in like high school.
Hmm.
I think maybe like 16. And I do remember that myself and a bunch of friends from the footy club and from my high school as well. Um, we played like a scratch match on like a Sunday at the footy club. And I was very competitive, and I remember being told off by the umpire for being too competitive. Um, but it was for me, yeah, there was no kind of real opportunity. I know that there was a couple of girls that, you know, friends of mine that played with like the under 14s would occasionally like play a game. But it just never seemed, I guess you can't, you know, there's that sort of saying you can't be what you can't see. And that certainly was true for me. But then after the AFLW kicked off in 2017, I sort of watched that first season, and I'm a Western Bulldogs fan, and I followed the Western Bulldogs all over the country. I went to every one of their games in that first season. Um, Fell in love with the competition, and I was like, oh, this, I would maybe really like to do this. And so after the season finished, I sort of decided that I would try and get a bit fit through the rest of 2017. And then I went and joined a local team in Ballarat in 2018, and I played footy for a couple of years in the senior women's team there, mostly in the back line, but would occasionally get thrown into the forward pocket and had no idea what I was doing. But it was a really great experience, and I'm really glad that even though it took me until my 30s, I'm really glad that I had that opportunity to play and have that experience of, training with your team, and then, getting to the ground we used to play on a Sunday, and I was always nervous, always had a belly full of nerves, whether it was my first game or my, 15th game. And just that, that sort of whole like ritual of getting ready for the game and, getting strapped, and I had issues with my hands, and so I used to have to get my fingers strapped, and just the warm up and then running out onto the ground and that first siren, the first bounce, like it's just it's a really amazing experience. I'm very, very grateful that I had the opportunity to have that.
Yeah, it's a breathtaking moment, that first siren, and you're like, oh, you got to take a first breath, and then usually the first time you can touch the footy, you can relax a little bit. But it is, I know exactly the feeling, like especially the first time I played, like it's you're almost lost a little bit when you first play, because just there's so much going on in so many different ways. You're kind of like, whoa, brain,
Yeah.
and it's even more for
And
me because I didn't have the years of watching, and I didn't. So it was like, and my first
yeah.
game was in a downpour. Like legitimately, it was raining. It was in Kansas City. The midfield was nothing but a mud pit by the end of it.
Nice.
So it was a nice. Well, the only thing though is it made landing on the grass when you got tackled a little softer. So it was kind of
A
nice.
little softer.
A little
Yeah.
little a little softer. Still didn't make the contact amongst human beings any softer, but it was a ton of fun. So that's great to hear that you got the chance to play, because again, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of women for the longest time until AFLW really has gotten going. The pathways at 12 usually were done. I mean, you went play netball, you went play cricket, there was no footy. So
There were some opportunities, but they were very few and far between,
mhm,
and they weren't accessible in the way that they are now. You almost had to
mhm,
kind of know, be in the know to know that there was, women's footy being played. And also, if you're sort of like 12, 13, 14, the next opportunity for a long time was like senior women's footy.
mhm,
And when you're 14 years old, like that's a pretty significant jump. And I think that would have turned a lot of young girls off, because they don't want to be playing against women who are like 25,
mhm,
30. When you're 14 years old, that's a massive age difference. So,
mhm.
it is really amazing now to see that those pathways are really taking shape, and that they're there, that, you can pick up a footy as a young girl in Auskick now, and you can play right through until senior footy and have
Mhm.
no gaps at all in your playing career. And that's incredible.
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And you can see the skills. You can definitely see the skills in the AFLW. The current drafting each year, the drafting girls get better and better. It is crazy to see the last three first
Because they've been
overall
playing,
picks. Oh yeah, they've
they've
been
already
playing
played.
almost their entire lives. They've been playing since
Yeah,
they
and they've
first
got
picked
like
up a
100
footy.
games under their belt
Exactly. Like
before they even get drafted.
I mean, literally, as much as we love the superstars, the Daisy Pierces, the Aaron Phillips, the scary part is there's almost better talent coming up in these 18-year-olds than the next 5 years. They are going to take over this league. The the Maddie and the Georgie Prasparkases, the Montana Hands, the Ellie McKenzies, the Flemings. I mean, these girls are going to take over this league and be the superstars of this league. Win the Aaron Phillips, the Daisy Pierces. When they retire, the next ones in are going to be absolutely fantastic. I cannot wait.
Mm,
And I
I'm
don't
so
want them to
excited.
go. And trust me, I don't want Daisy and Aaron to go anytime soon. But I know when they do, it's in really, really good hands, especially
Yeah,
with the youth that's coming up and the skill level. So you kind of
absolutely.
took my next question away from me a little bit. So I'm going to change it just the tiniest bit. You said you're a doggy supporter. Are you a doggy supporter just for the women, or do you support the men as well?
Across both. Yeah. So I've been a Western Bulldog supporter, or Footscray supporter as it was when I was a kid, since I was born, basically.
Mhm.
My dad's a Bulldog supporter. His dad's a Bulldog supporter. Yeah, it kind of I don't want to say it wasn't a choice, but
If it wasn't, it would make sense. I've heard so many stories
I
of fathers
definitely
telling their children, you're a insert their club supporter or you're out of the house. I've heard that story enough times
dad never
that it
said
makes
that.
sense.
He definitely never said that. But I feel like it was just
It was
also I had quite a few uncles and like extended family that were all Bulldog supporters as well. So
mhm.
it just I guess was just kind of a natural thing that that's the team that I would support too. So yeah, lifelong Bulldog.
Fantastic. Are there any black sheeps? Are there any people that broke away and support another club in the family?
Not really. My mum used to be a Richmond supporter. She now says that she's a Bulldog supporter, but then when the Tigers won those few flags, she was like, "Yeah, we won a flag," and it's like, "Hang on, you haven't been a Richmond
Yellow and
supporter
black
since you
comes out
married
when we
Dad."
need to. I love it. That is
And
great.
my my nieces and nephews, my older brother, his wife is a Saints supporter, and
Mhm.
so the kids kind of waver a little bit between the Bulldogs and the Saints, just kind of depending on the way the wind's blowing, I think.
That is great. And that's actually a great transition. As I tell a lot of people in it, unfortunately, US society, we get fickle a little bit. We tend to like
Mm,
winners. So you notice sometimes that some fans, they'll go, well, I'm a this supporter. 2 years later, they're a totally different team because they want to support a team that wins. So I asked this of Australians because it's fascinating to hear their response. Have you ever wavered as a Bulldog supporter?
no,
I love it.
never.
Absolutely love it.
I do. I have in the AFLW, I have bought like memberships for other clubs
Mhm.
because, particularly in the not so much now, but particularly in the early seasons when you couldn't buy tickets, like entry was free, buying memberships felt like a way to financially support the
Support the
league.
clubs. Mhm.
And so I have held memberships, AFLW memberships for other clubs. But no, I've never thrown it in. And look, the Bulldogs have had the men's team, especially have had some pretty rough years and some pretty
Mhm.
lean years. So, but even throughout that, never even considered it really. I don't think it ever sort of crossed my mind, and I don't care. It doesn't bother me if people change their teams. Like it doesn't. I don't mind at all. Like it has no impact on me whatsoever. So
Mhm.
do whatever you like, really. But just sort of never really crossed my mind
Yeah.
to ever change, even when you know, we were, losing every week or getting smashed by teams or anything like that. No, never crossed my mind.
Yep. And to each, everybody is different.
Absolutely.
I've
Absolutely.
told
Change every week if you like.
well, and that's kind of the thing that I find fascinating, and especially, and I'll kind of rotate it in with me a little bit, is the fact that with American fans, most of the time it's a random choice. It
Mm,
literally is a random choice. But my favorite thing on Twitter, if you ever get a chance to watch it, is when an American finds the sport of footy and they want to decide a team. It is the most hilarious thing when they go, who do you think I should support? It is gold because to watch their reactions are classic because you get the diehards of each of their clubs like you should be this a supporter, you should be this supporter,
yeah.
and it's like a meme. Saints, Bulldogs, Collingwood, Carlton, West Coast, Sydney, like all of them. It is
Yeah.
gold because and then they start interacting with each other and then the person starts interacting. It's absolutely classic. So I've gotten to the point, if I ever see that, I go, choose who you think you want. If you have any questions on what a club is like, let me know. Other than that,
Mm,
it's your choice because I think a lot of times your club that you're going to like the most, you're going to find on your own. It's not going to be something you're going to be pushed into. And that's the one thing I
yeah.
got to give is that, and a lot of them will throw out history facts like we've done this, we've done this, we've done this. And I think it's really cool because you find out history about all the clubs that you might not know, which I thought was
Yeah.
absolutely fascinating. So we'll jump to this. You kind of talked about a little bit is that you're a sports journal, and I love talking with sports journalism because I think it is something that I almost wish I really could have got into, because telling stories about players, fans, coaches, things like that, I think is fascinating. So I got to ask, what led you to be a sports journalist?
It's funny because I actually don't like sort of identify as a sports journalist.
Okay.
So I sort of call myself like a writer and an audio producer. But I don't I wouldn't necessarily say I'm a sports journalist. It's so funny because this is my honors project. Like I'm doing an honors research project about women in sports journalism in Australia, but um, sports journalism, like sports writing, is not something that I do every day.
Hmm.
It's not my sort of like main work. Definitely writing and content production and audio production and things like that is my sort of day-to-day work. But yeah, I sort of don't necessarily identify as a sports journalist. I write about sport for sure, and I definitely enjoy the work that I do. I've written for a few different places about sport, and obviously write for Siren about sport. Yeah, and I absolutely love doing that. I particularly love writing about the history of sport, women's sport in particular. Um, yeah, but I don't know. I sort of shy away a little bit from identifying as that because it's not what I do kind of day in, day out. Yeah.
That's not a problem. I love the writing aspect, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. As I told Dr. Casey Simons, I think Siren Sport is a fantastic, it's a fantastic outlet, and I've enjoyed the
Thank you.
articles. Again, I'm going to raise my hand. I need to read more. I haven't dove into it as much as I probably should, and I know there's been some great articles. So every email from now on I get from Simon, I will probably dive in a little bit more. So I truly appreciate. We'll talk about that just in the tiniest second, but really quickly, kind of, what's your typical day like? And I know Siren Sport is not one of those like you have deadlines that you have to do at a certain day. So, what would you consider your typical day as a writer?
Mm. Well, I think it's different every day. I just want to go back and answer something that you asked me in the previous question about like what sort of led me to writing about
Hmm.
sport. And it's the AFLW. I think when the AFLW launched, that sort of really dragged me in. Not that I wasn't interested in sport beforehand, followed the men's football competition, cricket and tennis in the summer was, always on the tally. But I think when the AFLW came along, that really changed my relationship with football in particular. And that was definitely my entryway into writing and doing a lot more work in and around sport. For me, a typical day, I mean, at the moment, it's very all over the place because I'm actually not working at the moment. I've taken time off. My previous work contract kind of wrapped up a few weeks ago, and I've taken like 3 months off work, like full time or part time work to focus on my honors thesis. So my days at the moment are very different from what they normally are,
Hmm.
and a lot of my day is really taken up with writing and working on my research and doing lots of reading and things like that. Which is not you know um, abnormal for a writer for sure. There's
Hmm.
always lots of research and of lots of writing, of course. When it comes to Siren, I guess, it's that's a volunteer run organization. We're not like employees. So that's very sort of the work that we do there is it's just you're just responding to things as they come up. And we have a partnership with the ABC, and so there's lots of administrative work around there around working out who we're working with, who we're commissioning, what stories we have on the go with that partnership and that kind of thing. So a typical day is there is no typical day.
That's not a
They're
problem.
very all over the place.
That's not a problem because there's no monotony to it, and that I think is absolutely
That's very
awesome.
true.
There's no monotony. There's always something different, and the best part is that you can
Yeah.
really approach something that's a passion for you, which I think is absolutely fantastic. And again, it's a great outlet. So I think it's Absolutely outstanding. Really quickly, if you don't mind a little bit, so you're going into your thesis, so you're going to your thesis work. I mean, I'm going to ask you just the tiniest bit about if you can. Has there anything
Sure.
surprised you about what you're kind of discovering as you're going through this? Has there been anything that's kind of shocked you? Is it all kind of what you thought? Like, kind of, what's kind of, how's it going? Like, to make it as simple as possible.
How's it going?
Very
Um,
Aussie on that one. How's it
I've
going?
seen this I've seen there's a graphic artist that I follow on Instagram, and she has this kind of little drawing that kind of talks about the process of working on a big project, and it's just like a big loop, going sort of
Hmm.
up and down, and you have these really high moments and these really like low moments. So that's kind of the story of an honors thesis for sure. I'm it's funny. I wish more had surprised me in the research.
Hmm.
I did semi-structured interviews, so just like long form interviews, anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes with women sports journalists in Australia. Um, I actually wish more had surprised me, to be honest. Um, so I guess at the moment, I would say that not a lot has surprised me out of those conversations. And probably what surprised me is what hasn't changed,
Hmm.
is probably the most surprising thing. Um, but yeah, change can be a very slow moving beast at times,
And, this,
particularly in sport.
especially and unfortunately in sport, I would say is it still really is a boys' club, and I hate saying that. I know I take
Yeah.
no pride in that as a male. I take no pride in that because I think that there are a lot of amazing writers that are female that I think honestly, if they just got their shot, they would really show that they're just as good as some of the guys that are getting a shot in the males. So 100%, like I'm behind this. Like I think it's fantastic what you're doing, and I've taken the time to meet as many female journalists and writers as that I can because I think so many of them have great stories. You,
Mm,
Dr. Casey Simons, I'm constantly back and forth with Sarah Burt with The Age, Marnie Vinyl. I think they do amazing work. Like I have not
yeah.
I absolutely love all their work and I fully support them. And I try as much as I can to like get their work out there because they are absolutely fantastic. And I love working with them. They've just been absolutely amazing to work with me because I'm a small podcast. It's not like I've got this massive Pat McAfee backing. So for them to take the time to reach out and chat with me is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to do what I can to support them, whether it's retweeting them on Twitter, reading their articles, giving them congratulations for another amazing article. I like doing that. So as
And you know
somebody,
what? That's great. I think that's a really positive thing. If you're, interested in sport and you like reading about sport and there are women working in that space, we should be supporting them. We should
mhm,
be, retweeting their stories and celebrating their successes. I think that's a really, really positive thing that the sort of broader sport community, fan community can be doing to encourage and support women in a space that can sometimes be really challenging to be a part
mhm.
of. So I think that's a really simple, straightforward, easy thing that you can do. Retweet someone's stories, like their tweets, share their work. Like it's so simple. And I think because it is so simple, people sometimes don't think that it's very important, but it is. And
No,
so good on you for doing that and encourage everyone else to be doing the same thing as well.
I try my best, and it's one of those you take for granted the simple things sometimes because you don't think you're making an impact, but
Yeah.
you'd be surprised you actually do. So we'll go on to it. Siren Sport, fantastic, fantastic outlet, and as you said, it's primarily volunteer. So I asked Dr. Simons this. How did it kind of come about? Because it's just this really, really fantastic outlet for female writers to be able to get their work out. There's nothing specifically. And then you have this connection with the ABC now. I think it's amazing. So, a little bit about how kind of Siren Sport came together. And then how do you think it's going? Is it progressing like you thought it would?
Yeah, so basically there was a conversation at I hope I've got this timeline right. I've just getting over a cold and my head's still a bit fuzzy, but
I
at
don't
the
think we're
end
gonna have
of
anybody going through the comments going, "She's off by 3 months." Don't worry about it.
thank you. So it was the end of 2019, and I believe it was the AFLW draft. And there was a few of the now co-founders of Siren who were there, and just kind of chatting, I guess. And what kind of came out of that conversation was the idea that perhaps we could achieve more change and we could affect more change if we sort of like combined our powers. I feel like we're like superheroes, and we've combined our powers to be some sort of
Mhm.
outfit. But that basically was the driving force, that we thought, okay, we're all individually doing this work, whether it's podcasting, writing, whatever it is that we're working on. We're all individually off, trying to change things, trying to change sport, and particularly sort of sports media. And what if we sort of came together and created something to sort of drive that change? And that's really how Siren was born. And we launched in at the start of 2020, and we have our newsletter. I guess our kind of remit has always been to challenge the status quo of sports media, which is very much that boys' club that you spoke about. I mean, we have the statistics in Australia that, women's sport gets so little coverage compared to men's sport in the mainstream media. We know that there are still, maybe I think the last figures that I looked at came from 2021, saying that women had written only, I think it was 12 or 13% of sports stories in mainstream
Mhm.
media. And those numbers are pretty damning, and sports seems to be one of the only sort of sectors of media that has just like stubbornly, doggedly refused gender equity. And so we are trying to make that change. And yeah, we are, giving opportunities, particularly to young and emerging women and non-binary writers, to and sort of, journos, storytellers, however they want to talk about themselves, opportunities to get some clips, to get some stories published, and sort of, begin building a profile for themselves. We launched the Emerging Sports Writer program, which is a really effective way for us to do that. And we mentor well, not young, emerging. Emerging doesn't mean
Mhm.
young. We mentor emerging writers and provide them with, as much kind of advice and support as we can, and, give them those opportunities to get some bylines, get some stories out there, which is, I mean, just having the opportunity is really important, because it can be really, really hard to break into mainstream media. So, that's what we're doing. That sort of continues through our partnership with the ABC. We work with a lot of emerging writers through through our partnership with the ABC. Actually just working on a story now that will hopefully be going up in the next week with an emerging writer, which is really fun. Um, yeah, so our focus is really on, what we can do to shift that status quo. And that is about, the partnership with the ABC, which is amazing, which is helping increase the coverage of women's sport and women in sport on the ABC. But also the work that we're doing to support emerging women and non-binary people in the space and provide them opportunities. It's all really, really amazing work. It can be really hard at times. We would love to have an endless budget. So if there's any people with deep pockets out there listening that want to want to support Siren, you can definitely get in touch. We'd be more than happy to chat to you. But yeah, it's been really positive. We've been able to be a part of some really amazing things, and we've been able to publish some really incredible stories. We've been able to support some emerging writers to publish some great stories, and that's really amazing. So who knows what the future holds? We're just going to keep doing what we're doing and keep evolving and growing, and seeing how we can continue to affect change.
And that's absolutely fantastic, and all power to you. I can't wait to see it continue to progress. I almost wanted to joke, if I ever won the lottery over here, I'd throw some money at Siren, because I think it would be so worth it would so be so worth the investment.
Thank you.
Absolutely, for sure. So let's go a little bit. As you said, you're doing your honors thesis, but I want to go back a little bit. Do you have a story that you've written, or that you have of writing, that's really memorable? That's something it's going to stick in your mind for a long time.
Mm, gosh, that's a tough one. Um, there's lots. There's lots of people that I've been lucky to have an opportunity to speak to. Lots of stories that have been really fun to work on. It's hard to kind of pick one. I did a story through the ABC partnership with Siren early this year about the first ever women's Ashes,
Hmm.
which was in Australia in 1934-35. That was a lot of fun, and we managed to find some really cool photos and video from that Ashes tour, which was amazing. Um, there's lots of great stories. I did a really fun story for Siren on goalball, which is actually the only sport in the Paralympics that was kind of designed specifically for people with vision impairment.
Hmm.
So it's not like it's not sort of like a sport that has been made accessible. That was a really amazing, fun story to work on. I got to go along to a training session with the Australian team and meet a bunch of the players and watch them play. And goalball is one of the most exhilarating but also terrifying sports I've ever seen, because I would not be I think I'd be too scared to put my like literally put my body on the line like they do in goalball. If you haven't seen it, I really recommend checking it out. But yeah, there's been lots of history stories too, like moments when I get to sort of delve into the um the history books of a particular sport or person in sport. And those are always fun, I think, to sort of share those with people. And sometimes people are like, oh, I knew that, and often they're like, I had no idea about that. That's incredible. So yeah, those stories are always fun. Yeah, but I don't think I could pick a favorite.
And that's not a problem. It's like picking a favorite player on your team. Sometimes it's almost impossible, because you feel like you'd be
It is.
doing somebody an injustice. So I love it, because
Yes.
with you get a chance to sit down and do one-on-one interviews with this. And I've actually seen this over here, where American journalists who have been fans of a team get the chance to interview somebody that they got to watch, and they become starstruck. You can kind of tell it's a little bit. So have you ever been starstruck in an interview for a writing for or a video?
Hmm. I'm sure I have. There's definitely those moments where you're talking to elite athletes, and you're like, um, this person plays in the highest competition in the country for their
Hmm.
sport. And that can often be a little bit like, wow, you've watched them on TV or, seen them in the papers or what have you, and then you're on the phone with them or on a Zoom with them. I'm sure I definitely have. I can't sort of tell you any exact moments at the moment because none are jumping out to me, but yeah, definitely moments. Yeah, when you feel a little bit, yeah, a little bit silly almost,
Hmm. And
where
that
the fan really takes over.
yeah, I remember I was chatting with Sarah Ollie, and I remember her saying that as she was in the Fox Footy things, and Dustin Martin came in, and she like literally just she didn't get a chance to interview him, but she had that moment when she saw him, and it was like, oh my god, that's Dusty Martin. So it was kind of those. So I always kind of laughed at
Yeah, it's
that one a little bit.
you really have to try and separate their sort of persona from them as a person.
Hmm.
Which I feel like is easier to do if you're talking on the phone. If you
Oh, that
can't
makes
see
sense.
them, I feel like it's easier to sort of make that separation, and you perhaps don't get as starstruck.
That
In
makes
my
tons of sense.
experience.
That makes tons of sense. So I'm gonna give you that opportunity. As sports stars, we all have that. We'd love to kick the goal after the siren. For a writer or for a video person, what's your dream interview? What's the one person, if you could sit here and say, I want to have a sit down interview with to do an article about? Who is it?
I would really love to go back and chat to the women who were working in sports journalism in the 1930s in Australia. So women like Lois Quarrel, Pat Jarrett. I would love an opportunity to sit down with them and just, yeah, have a chat about what they're doing and what it's like working in at that time in the industry, and what the challenges are, what the successes are. I think that would be it would be so wonderful an opportunity to talk to those women who were real trailblazers, even if they didn't necessarily think they were at the time. Yeah, so if I could get in my DeLorean and head back in time, I would go to the 1930s and be chatting to these women sports journalists.
Fantastic. That's amazing. And that's really, really cool. And that would be the stories that they would go through, both good and bad, unfortunately, would be just amazing to hear. I would that would be
Mm,
fantastic to be able to do that. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury, but that would be
no.
absolutely amazing. So we're gonna go out of job a little bit. We're gonna go into the footy. I mean, I really want to dive into this because you as a Western Bulldogs fan, this is gonna be fantastic because we're gonna start off with AFLM. Thoughts on the men's year? We are hours away from round 23 getting started. How nervous are you as a Bulldogs fan, knowing that you got to beat Hawthorn this week, and then you got to have a little bit of help? Are you gonna be a Collingwood Magpies supporter this week?
Yes, we really need a hand from the footy gods, I think. I feel like as a Western Bulldogs supporter, this is not an unusual situation, or an unfamiliar situation. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm hopeful that we can sort of sneak into the finals. 2016 was a really good year for us, and we only just snuck into those finals. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's been a bit of a tumultuous year for us. I think we've lost some games that we really should have won. We really should be in a better position than we are. But that's them's the breaks. That's how footy rolls. So yeah, obviously hoping for a win this weekend. And some finals action. But at the same time, I get very stressed watching the football. Um, my partner is always like laughing at me. He's like, I thought you loved the football, but you sit in front of it and you don't watch it. I get, especially in the close games, I will be scrolling my phone. I'm like, I can't watch this. It's so stressful. So
I
as much
love
as
it.
I would love to see us play in the finals, yeah, it will be a stress-free sort of August, September for me, if not.
Well, I'll throw one out there. When you listen to Dr. Casey Simons, listen to her reaction. She is a pacer. She doesn't sit still when she watches the footy. She's a pacer. She told me herself. I had to laugh a little bit because everybody footy watches differently. So I thought that was fascinating that she said that. So you're not the only one that
It's
gets
funny that
really
she's
stressed.
I have that experience myself. I remember the 2016 AFLM Grand Final. I was watching, I have two brothers, and I was watching with both of them.
Don't remind me.
And
That brings up some
I know,
evil
I'm
memories
sorry. I'm
from.
very
No, you're good.
sorry.
You're good. I'm 100% honest with you. It was a bittersweet good grand final for me because I knew if the Swans win, I could be happy. But I knew if the Doggies won, there was still a little part of me that was going to be happy because of the story. You almost kind of
Yeah.
felt a little bit like you didn't mind because you guys had had the drought just like the Swans had in 2005. It was a longish
Yeah.
drought. It'd been so long. So there was a part of me that was like, even if we lose, I'm going to be okay with it because the Duggies have had that streak that needed to be broken. So
Yeah.
contrary to some Swans fans who are still a little miffed, and as I tell most people when it comes to Swans, don't bring up 2016 with some Swans fans because it brings up fighting words. I'm not so pained on it. I'm sad, but I kind of did take that journalism. I love the story, the fact that the Doggies ended a 63-year drought. So it's one of those. When you bring
Yeah.
up 2016, sometimes it's fascinating for me. I can handle it. I'm not so much enwrapped in like some Swans fans. So
But that's good to hear. But yeah, I remember it was like the last couple of minutes of the game, maybe under 2 minutes, and there was, a couple of goals in it, and I was like, my brother's house, the house he was living in at that point, had like a big open plan living, dining, kitchen room. And I was just kind of like pacing up and down, up and down. And my younger brother was like, Curb, it's okay. It's okay. Like, there's no way. Like, we've got it. We've won. And I'm like, no, I've supported Footscray my entire life. We haven't won until the siren goes. Like, I just cannot
Mm-hmm.
trust that we have won the game until the siren goes. So there was lots of pacing happening that day. So I can totally understand where Casey's coming from. Footy is very stressful.
It can be, trust me. It can be, and for me, for me, it's an even weirder situation because of the time difference. Like, I've told this,
Yeah.
I've told some stories to a few people. It's like, imagine it being 5 a.m. in the morning, and your team is 2 points up. There's only 2 minutes left in the game, and you can't yell, you can't scream, you can't do anything except be quiet. It is the weirdest sensation ever. Like, I'll tell you, the funniest one that I have is Buddy Franklin's 1,000th goal. I was at home.
Yeah.
I was working at home at the time, and my wife is asleep. I'm in a condo complex. I can't yell. I can't scream. I
Yeah.
can't do anything except throw my fists out. That's about the only thing I can do. So when that goal goes through and everybody loses their minds, I'm like,
Silent screaming.
it was, the silent films would have loved my acting on that particular day. But that's just how weird it is for me. So I kind of,
Yeah.
it is a very weird sensation. Like, I don't know, when I do finally get to Australia, and I did get to go to a game, it's going to be the weirdest thing because I'm going to be able to yell. I'm going to be able to scream. I'm going to be able to sing. I'm going to be able to do all this stuff that in my
That you can't normally do.
everyday footy experience, I've not been able to really do, except after the game is over. I've had a few nuffy moments when Sydney beat Melbourne this year. I kid you not. I was driving. I had to go to the grocery store. It was like 7 in the morning. I'm driving to the grocery store and I'm belting out the Swan song. Like, I have it full blast on my car. I am belting it out, and I'm getting the weirdest looks from the people that are in the cars next to me at any stoplight. And I've got my Swans hat, I've got my Swan shirt, and I'm just belting away. And I'm getting the weirdest looks. People are looking at me like, this guy is nuts. Light change, light change. This guy is nuts. Like, it is the funniest thing. So I full on Nuffy there. I know exactly how you feel, but it is a weird sensation to sometimes be an American fan if you can't do what a normal supporter
Can't
is
do the
normally
cheering.
used to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a great one. So we'll get off the M a little bit because I don't know about you, but I am super excited. The women's season is a week away. OMG,
Yeah.
it is a week away. So I'm going to ask you this as a Bulldog supporter, how excited are you for this upcoming season? And then how different is it going to be knowing that your team had a few losses from this expansion? Bonnie Too Good is gone. Isabel Huntington is gone. You maintained Ellie Blackburn. You kept Christy Lamb. So what are your thoughts on this year's Dougie's AFLW season?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? I think last year was quite challenging for the Dogs.
Mm-hmm.
Gemma Bastiani wrote a great three-piece series for Siren about the Western Bulldogs season. She was very bullish about them before last season kicked off and was, really excited to see how they go. And COVID just kind of,
Mm-hmm.
took the wheels off the off the train there, and everything kind of collapsed a little bit. So last season was pretty challenging. I mean, yeah, those losses are not fun, obviously.
Mm-mm.
Izzy was really hard. I'm really going to miss her. Love Bonnie, Brooke Lachlan as well. Like, those are like, it's never fun. But I think I kind of approach that situation in the AFLW slightly differently to the men's season or to the men's competition because it's a very different
Mm-hmm.
landscape. They have so many other things to consider. It's not just about signing a big contract. They have jobs and lives outside of footy. And so the conversations are just much more complex
Mhm.
for the women. And so as heartbreaking as it is for a fan to be losing players that you love, you certainly can't begrudge them, moving for better opportunities or more opportunities. You don't get to play footy at the elite level for a long time, and so make hay while the sun shines kind of thing. So yeah, it sucks, but wish them all the best for sure. For us, I'm definitely excited to get back to some footy. The last couple of years have been a bit challenging being a fan. It's been kind of, do you go to the footy? Do you not go to the footy? Like that's
Mhm.
been an interesting conversation, and that conversation hasn't gone away. I think it's still here with us for sure. So that's a big part of it as well. But I'm looking forward to getting back to some footy and to see some footy. Unfortunately, we won't be at the Whitten Oval this year. I'll give with the redevelopment. We'll be playing. I think we're playing all our home games at Princess Park. Icon Park. But yeah, I'm excited to get back to some footy. I've got tickets for like 3 games next weekend, so
Oh boy.
it's just going to be a weekend of football, which is going to be pretty fun. But yeah, so looking forward to it. And for the dogs, I mean, I'm sort of not going into the season with any real expectations. Um, yeah, just hoping for some good wins and some progress and some development. That's what I'm looking for. We have a really, really young team, so
Mhm.
if we can make some progress in terms of their individual development and their team development, that's a positive.
100% agree with you. And unfortunately, I 100% agree with you. If COVID doesn't kill you, COVID doesn't get the Western Bulldogs and you don't lose to GWS, I think the doggies make finals last year. Like I legitimately think that they could have made finals last year. And
It would have
it
been a
it
very, very different season.
exactly it 100% because that GWS game, you could tell the women hit a wall in that third quarter and there was just nothing left. They had so
It was
many.
something like,
Yep.
was it like 6 or 7 games in like 30 days?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
that is
And
like
there were
a
several.
level.
Yep. Yep.
It's
It
just,
was.
it's so intense for women who are part-time athletes. Like they're
Hmm.
not full-time professionals. They're not doing
Yep.
this 24/7.
Yep.
And they're also living through, the challenges of lockdowns and restrictions and all that kind of stuff. They've lived through that as well. So yeah, it was a really, really tough season. So
Yeah. And unfortunately,
anything that's a step up from that would be good this
they were
year.
they were just they were just they were one of the teams that I felt so bad for because I think if you change that, if they don't have the COVID issues, I think they make finals because that's how well they looked, especially their first.
Yeah.
I mean, going over and beating the Crows was absolutely, I think, was the
Oh,
game
that
of the
game was so good.
I think that game was game of the year. Legitimately, I told everybody, I said that was
Amazing.
game of the season because they jumped on the Crows early in that game, and the Crows went whoa, and you could kind of tell they were not expecting that. And then the doggies, the stingy, absolutely miserly defense at the end of that game to hold off the Crows was fantastic. So I'm bullish on the
Yeah,
dog. I'm
that
bullish
game
on
was
your
amazing.
doggies this year. I think they can make finals
Thanks.
with the increase of 2 more teams this year, getting 8 in. I think the 6 teams that made last year are going to be in. A couple of them took hits, but the teams that took the biggest hits are the Carltons, didn't make finals. I think their losses, I think, will kind of drag them down. I think the Doggies and Richmond, I think, are the 2 teams that I see most likely, maybe GWS, just kind of depending on how things kind of go, are the 3 teams
Mm,
I think that are battling for those final 2 spots in the finals. I think the top 6 will be the same. They didn't take a lot of hits. I don't think their hits are really going to hurt them. Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, I think are the top 3 flag contenders. Melbourne looks scary because they're that good this year.
yeah.
But I think the Doggies and Richmond are my two teams that I think are going to get those final spots, which I think would be great for both clubs, especially for Richmond being a relatively, and then the Doggies, they're young, but there's a lot of really solid players. And when you've got Ellie Blackburn in the middle, you've got some great base to start off your team with. So I'm bullish on your doggies. I'm bullish on them. I think they can make finals this year. So we'll we'll jump to a whole thing here. Okay, Who's your flag favorite? Who's the team that right now, if you had to say they're most likely going to win the flag? And I know there's still 10 rounds and then 3 rounds of finals. Who do you think is going to win the flag this year?
Mm, mm. I mean, it's always hard to go past Adelaide. I just think they're so like the depth is just incredible, and they have such a strong team. I mean, obviously losing Aaron Phillips, tough, but I don't think Aaron Phillips has had as big an impact last year as what she normally does. So I think the Crows can cover that. But having said that, I feel like I don't know. See, this is where the footy romantic comes back in because for me, Melbourne winning a flag, Daisy Pearce winning a flag is would be just beautiful. Would love to see that. Absolutely love to see that. I'd also love to see Freo get up. Really, I'd love to see Freo have an opportunity to get a flag. Given that their men's team has been unsuccessful, it would be amazing for their women's team to win the first one. Um, yeah, but I think I'm if I had to choose right now, a week out from the season starting, I would chuck some money on Melbourne.
I would. I am too.
I
Like
think they got a lot to prove.
I'm doing my preview show next week, and I've been sitting there just like I said, racking my brain on it, and it's just Melbourne is just so deep. They're just so scary if they can stay healthy, because I think a little bit of their depth left a little bit. Brianna Taryn went up to Sydney. Some of their depth players that could come in, they lost a little bit of that. So can they stay healthy? If they stay healthy, it is hard to not see, like I said, the big three, Brisbane, Adelaide, Melbourne, being the three best teams. Like I think they're in a category. There's a couple steps down, and then you have your Fremantles, your Norths, your Collingwoods, then maybe a step, and then you have your. I'm not really sure how does Gold Coast bounce back with losing Sermon and Perkins and some of the experience they lost. Tigerland, how do they handle additions of Grace Egan, a few mid-level losses, but still without Harriet Cordner, who I think was kind of their stable in their back line. So I I have Melbourne, but it's hard because Brizzy is really good. They didn't lose much. And Adelaide, I agree with you. Aaron Phillips is a loss, but I don't think it's as big a loss as some people may think it is. She's an amazing addition for Port. I think Port could be
Mm.
Port and Essendon are the two teams of the expansions that I think could be pushing up the ladder. I just don't know if they're going to be in finals contention because there's still going to be a little bit of lack of depth because of the fact they've only had a month and a half
I
to
think there's
train.
also, yeah, and there's that team cohesiveness. I
Exactly.
think footy is a team sport, and knowing your teammates and how they play and where they're going
Mhm.
to run and how they're going to respond in a situation is such a big part of that. And that takes time to develop. And you don't necessarily develop that just through training. You
Mhm.
need to play games together. You need to learn who each other are and how you respond and how you play. And so I think that's always the challenge for the newer teams is that they don't, they're sort of coming into the season without that. They're starting with a blank slate, and that can be obviously really challenging when you're playing against teams who, might have 12, 13, 14 players on the field that have played 20, 30 games together, so they
Mhm.
have much more of that sort of team cohesiveness. So I think that's always a challenge, but I'm very interested to see how Essendon are going to go. I think their list building has been pretty solid. I think they've picked up some really great players, so I'm going to be very, very interested to see how they go. And it's going to be quite romantic, I think, to see Erin Phillips be playing for the club that her dad had so much success with.
And she
So
gets to
that's
and she
that's
gets to
another one
be
of
the
those wonderful moments.
and she gets to be the captain of it. And I
The
love
captain,
the
yeah,
video of her showing her father that she was going to be the captain of Port was
beautiful.
absolutely fantastic.
Made me
And
cry.
yeah, it was so cool. And to see her father get choked up, who's the rough and tumble footy player, it was awesome. And like I think it was fantastic. It was absolutely amazing to see that because it shows the emotion, the connection to the club. And I put that, I actually responded on Instagram and I said, I love this. It shows how much they both love the club. And crazy enough, Aaron Phillips liked it. So I kind of had a geek out moment when that happened. So
Yeah, I mean, I think those kind of things really speak to the way in which, football is particularly at, AFLW, AFLM level. It's, the elite version of the sport. It's, national competition. It's, it's a really big deal. But at the end of
Mhm.
the day, these are still football clubs and these are still people, and
Mhm.
there's still that history and that storytelling, and there's still things that are bigger and deeper and broader than football.
Oh yeah. And the
And
family connection
they're
in
they're
that
such a huge
situation.
Yeah, and they're such a huge part of the story as well, and they make it better. All that kind of stuff makes footy better.
100%. Absolutely. 100%. All right. We're winding down. So I like to have a little bit of fun with some of my final questions. So I want you to put your fan hat on here. I want you,
Always got it on.
all right. And I know, I want you to put your fan hat on here, not your writer hat, not your fan hat. I'm gaining information because I want to know when I come over very soon. I want to know first, what's the best food to have at the footy?
Well, I'm
I
a
asked this, you'd
vegetarian,
be surprised how
so
many different answers I have gotten. It is not just a pie. You'd be surprised
yeah,
how
well,
many people don't say that. I've had hot chips, I've had jam donuts, I've had my Port Adelaide person gave me 3 or 4 different very unique food styles that are at the Adelaide Oval. So it's not just a pie. It's not as simple as that sometimes.
no, absolutely not. And yeah, as I said, I'm a vegetarian, so I don't I'm not going to eat the meat pies anyway, or the sausage rolls. Um, Favorite food at the footy. I'm one of those people that will often bring my own food.
Okay.
We'll sneak in, a sandwich or a thermos of tea or coffee or something like that. Um, yeah, we'll often do that.
If you
Um,
work at any of the things of security, don't pay attention to this. Forget this part.
That's fine. You're allowed to bring food to the footy. Um, for me, footy food is generally hot chips.
Hmm.
That's generally my sort of if I'm going to buy anything at the footy, I'm going to buy hot chips or potato cakes.
Awesome.
It's hot chips or potato cakes. So it's basically just variations of fried potato. Is my preferred footy food.
Well, as many say, it gets cold sometimes. You got to have that warm. You got to have that warm thing to hold on to. Not only is it to eat,
You
but it's to
need
keep you
some,
warm a little bit.
absolutely.
Which I
Yeah,
and and,
absolutely.
and I got to tell you this. I've always had fun. I've always had fun with this. As I hear so many Aussies all the time go, it's a winter sport. It's a winter sport. It's a winter sport. I've said this to many. It's a winter sport in Australia because if you
Mm,
tried to play footy up here in the winter, you'd not like it. Okay. Sometimes there are days in January where it is minus 12 here.
yeah.
That is normal temperature. And there's also at least 20 to 30 centimeters of snow on the ground. Can't play footy in the winter in every place. So I always have a little bit of fun with that. It is
There
no
are
disdain.
some that is some extreme temperatures for sure. But there are definitely some parts of Victoria where it gets, I'm not sure it gets to minus 20, but very, very, very cold. And I do remember one day, a couple of years ago now, when I was still playing footy for a team up in Ballarat. I was driving up to footy in the morning. I had to be there early to sort of get set up for the day and be there for the under 13s to play. I think they were kicking off at like 9 o'clock or something ridiculous on a Sunday. And driving up to footy, and it was snowing.
Awesome.
And it was so, so, so cold. The team that I think our under 15s were supposed to play against another team, and they were like, "Oh, it's too cold. We need to call it off." And me and our team were like, no, it's not. It's fine. It'll be fine by the time the under 15s play. We're not calling it off. And they got very annoyed at me and ended up forfeiting because they didn't want to play because it was too cold. So
Oh, it's funny.
we had another team come over and play with the girls. And I always remember at the end of that game, you were talking about the middle of the ground being just like mud. It was
Hmm.
like that at this ground too. It had been raining the day before, the snow early in the morning. It was so cold and wet and rainy. And those girls at the end of the under 15s game, which their original team had forfeited and then another team had come in and played them, they were like sliding through the mud, just like running up and sliding through the mud on their bellies. And I'm
Oh,
like,
don't you love that?
this is why you play footy.
Yep, and that's the best part. The parents will hate it because they have to wash those clothes, but at least the kids are having fun.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing. So, all right, now that we've had that, we're gonna go to Marvel Stadium. We're gonna go to the MCG. When you go, where's your perfect place? The one place you have to sit to watch the footy.
At the MCG or Marvel Stadium
MCG,
or anywhere.
Marvel, if you have a preference.
I generally tend to want to sit somewhere on the wing. Um, Sort of maybe more towards like a forward pocket or a back pocket, depending on which way you're going. I don't really like sitting behind the goals because like it's just what's happening at the other end of the ground, like what is going on, you too far away. So I much prefer to sort of be sitting more sort of, yeah, on the wing, but more towards the pocket, is where I would prefer to sit. But in terms of stadiums and things like that, I much prefer going to the suburban grounds like, you know, Witten Oval or Princes Park, like those grounds. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something feels a little bit more intimate, and yeah, there's just something. I think intimate is the right word. Just feels a little bit more intimate at those grounds to go along and watch footy at that ground, as opposed to, I mean, the MCG is amazing. Like if you get the opportunity to go there, you should. It's incredible. But it's so big.
Mm-hmm.
It's so big.
Hundred,
So I
hey,
kind of do prefer
100,000
the
can sit
smaller
in there.
stadiums.
It can't be small. So,
That's a lot
and
of people.
yep, and that's one of the things that when I do go, one of the things that I want to figure out a way is to get like a weekend where I can go see a suburban local footy, like be able to stand on the boundary and just enjoy a game from ground level footy. Like I want to do that. Like
Yeah.
I'm I'm one of those, like, as much as I love the AFL and the AFLW and all that, like seeing the local footy, I think will be something that I want to try to do as well, because it's it's the grassroots of it. It's the thing that everybody grows up
It's
with.
a
I think
very different experience. So you should
exactly.
definitely, and look, if you come over in, while the AFL season is running, there's lots of local footy happening. Like
Hmm.
you can, have a wander through the suburbs in Melbourne and you'll come across a bunch of games being played. So, yeah, that is a really wonderful experience. I very much enjoy going along to local footy, and watching. It's a very, very different experience.
Yep.
But
And
a, but a really, really good one. And the
yep.
canteens are often really great. So the food you can get at local footy, really good.
I've heard that sometimes they have the best ones, because especially it's homemade. So
Yes.
the last question that I like asking, and this is fun for me because you're going to get different answers from everybody, because it's going to connect a little bit to your past a little bit. Favorite game of footy you have ever seen? Men's, women's, local, doesn't matter. TV, whether you saw it live. Favorite game of footy you've ever seen?
I mean, I've seen a couple of Western Bulldogs grand finals that were pretty amazing. I watched the 2016 one at home with my brothers, and I watched the women's 2018 grand final there on the day I was at that game. They were pretty amazing. I've been to quite a few AFLW grand finals. Was at Adelaide Oval with 53,000 other people, and
Fantastic.
watched
That was
that. I went
amazing.
along to the first AFLW grand final on the Gold Coast, and that was pretty incredible. But the first AFLW game was amazing. That Carlton Collingwood, the lockout, at
Hmm.
Princes Park was, one of the most incredible experiences of my life, being in the grandstands that night. But I have to say, I think my favourite game of footy, um, that I've seen to this point was my nephew's first under 12s game.
Awesome.
That was really, really sweet. I mean, all those games that I've seen, all those, AFLW and AFLM games, they're amazing moments to be a part of, like incredibly historic games. The first AFLW game and grand finals and things like that. They're amazing moments. I'll never forget kind of thing. But I think that sort of family connection, seeing him play footy, was really, really special. And I actually missed the AFLW grand final this year because he was playing on that day. And I had to make a choice between that grand final and watching him, and I chose to watch him, of course. Yeah, I think that is probably one of my favorite games that I've ever seen, because yeah, it's just that family connection. It's that stories, and those moments, and that's yeah, it's a really special one for me to be there for him.
Love it. That's absolutely fantastic. And that's the reason why I asked that, because you never know what you're going to get. I've had a local footy grand final winner that I've had with some of the fans that I've talked to. So it's just interesting because I love hearing what their connection is and why, and it's always great to hear. So that's why I asked that question, because it does, it
It's a
brings up
good question. I like it.
it brings up a lot of it brings up a lot of great memories. The smiles on their faces when they think of it's always great to see. So Kirby, this has been a fantastic conversation. Again, like I said with Dr. Casey, I love Siren Sports. Again, I'm trying to get in. I'm trying to read more of it because what I've read has been fantastic. I've absolutely loved all
Thank
the
you.
articles. It's been absolutely great. I know you and I have had a few different times to get this together, and we finally made it happen. And this has been fantastic. I appreciate you coming on here and talking about everything that's going on. I wish you much luck with your honors, and hopefully it doesn't stress you out too much, and you can get it done and enjoy a little bit of it as you do it.
Thank you. That's very kind. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure to talk. So thanks for having me on.
All righty then, ladies and gentlemen, that is another episode of Donnie's Disposals. And as you can tell, AFLW is getting started. We have our preview episode coming out very, very soon. Keep an eye on it, and we will be back very, very soon. See you again.